Part 33. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 322. After experiencing several dangers in the universe, Jia Yan confirmed that his feelings were not hallucinations, so when he returned to Earth, he was still a little sure of those red rays. He thought he could dodge the attack of a ray of light, but if several rays of light appeared to attack him at once, it would still be a bit dangerous. He has even thought of his own escape route. If there is really nothing you can do. He just thought of a way to take his family in his own aircraft. Through the combination of wings and brainwave power, Jia Yan can return to the universe at any time. This is his greatest security. No matter how powerful the metal monster is, it can't be chasing him into the universe, right? These are all the strategies Jia Yan thought of before returning to Earth. Of course, plans can't keep up with changes. Things often don't go according to plan, so he has to be wary of some changes. Whether the metal monster is what he thought, unable to emit the most powerful red light, and whether they have stronger weapons, these are all something he needs to be wary of. Jia Yan was still cruising. His speed was not fast, and he just kept cruising around the place where this small mountain village was located. And it's not far from the area where Jia Yan is cruising. One after another, the metal monsters have just left the scope of Shanghai City. The metal monsters in other areas seem to have received some instructions. When Jia Yan was fighting in the small mountain village, they kept leaving their area and were constantly moving. Gathering. The direction they were traveling in was not far from where Jia Yan was. Except for Jia Yan and the metal monster, the entire human area suddenly received such a piece of information. An extremely huge giant mosquito landed from space. On his way down, he even attracted metal monsters who were fighting. Countless metal monsters saved the falling Shanghai from the terrible situation that was about to fall. Come back after being rescued. But this giant mosquito. He did not fall behind, and started a battle with the army of metal monsters. He just flew over the Shanghai city with a startling glance, and then disappeared into the vast night. This news. It's like giving some people a shot of chicken blood. Some people. As early as the early days of the appearance of metal monsters, it was asserted that metal monsters and giant mosquito monsters were two different creatures. The relationship between them is not that good, and conflicts will definitely break out. Each of these people will speak their own words. What he said was clear-cut, as if he knew a lot about the so-called giant mosquito race and the metal monster race. In fact, they are just some fringe figures wandering in the orthodox biology and scientific circles. These people have made absolutely no achievements in ordinary academic subjects. But since the war broke out, they relied on their own lax scientific attitude. On the contrary, in this doomsday-like era, they have gained more attention and benefits. As a result, all of these guys are living very well. It was originally a battle between the giant mosquito monster and the metal monster. Just be brought up by these people to talk about it. As a result, Jia Yan disappeared for nearly half a year. These people immediately put their words into other aspects, but no matter how powerful they boasted, human beings were still losing ground. And under this situation, the supergiant mosquito has been appearing in the public eye. Each of these people seem to have discovered the greatest treasure. Tell me your opinion. Just when Jia Yan was patrolling around the small mountain village, a person signed Shanghai's top biologist, Li Yongkang, issued a telegram, notifying many mainstream media around the world. The giant mosquito monster reappears. The war between the giant mosquito race and the metal monster race is about to break out. Humans can no longer bear the pressure of the metal monsters unilaterally. This rhetoric immediately generated a huge response among all media, where even communication is somewhat difficult nowadays. And after that, people with various signatures, some so-called Zhuangjia and Miaoxiao whose names have never been heard by the world, began to convey their own news to various places in their own names. To put it bluntly, These people are just guys who are taking advantage of this situation, creating topics, and finally earning fame for themselves. However, this news still inspired countless people. In fact, what they said was that mankind has been oppressed for so long, and the war has been so oppressive. Now, another existence that may be reinforcements appears. Is this possible? Isn't that a good thing? Therefore, even in an era when many communications and media have been cut off, this topic is like a spring breeze, blowing the whole world. In this dilapidated human world, suddenly once again, there was a craze about giant mosquito monsters. Will the giant mosquito monster really start a war with the metal monster? Every time the giant mosquito race appears in the world, there is only one. Are they really just one as some previous internet rumors said? So how likely is this? If the giant mosquito monster really fights the metal monster, what benefits can humans get during this period? Countless radio stations suddenly sprung up one after another, reporting the news about giant mosquitoes. In fact, during this period, I don't know how many people wanted to take advantage of this topic. People in high positions were just experts who created topics, but they were not people who could really solve the problem. In short, no matter what, all humans at this time seemed to be a little restless because of this latest giant mosquito. As for the final result of this restlessness, it is unknown. While they were discussing, the main character, Big Mosquito, had no idea at this moment. He didn't know that his appearance was actually so anticipated by humans, but no matter how much humans expected him, Jia Yan couldn't be moved by it. He knew that he was no longer the human being he was before. Being able to remember his family was good enough. What if he still had to work hard to help humans? Then forget it. So now he is just wandering around in small villages. He can't go anywhere else to fight metal monsters. Because he doesn't want to be used as a gun by humans. However, his client didn't want to do that, but those metal monsters didn't seem to be as friendly as him. They are already gathering, especially the metal monsters in the Shanghai area. They are gathering together one by one to form a huge army. March slowly towards this small village. It has only been a few hours since Jia Yan returned to Earth. Jia Yan patrolled dozens of miles around the small mountain village and found no metal monsters or other threats for the time being. He returned to the small mountain village and began to descend downward. After confirming the general safety, he couldn't wait to see what his family wanted to be there. The giant mosquito is really back. Just when Jia Yan returned to the sky above the small mountain village, he discovered that at least 1,000 people had gathered below at some unknown time. These people were all former residents of this small village. Many people have lived in this village for nearly half a year. For the previous metal monster attack, go to Shiyuan. Although they escaped from this place, there was no way to go to the outside world, so some people hid in the nearby mountains and forests, and now they have returned. The news that a giant mosquito came to this place and killed countless metal monsters was quickly passed among these survivors as if it had wings. Some people were just people from other nearby villages. Their villages were also attacked by this metal monster. They originally thought about escaping to Shanghai City. Although it was said that there were more metal monsters there were more metal monsters there. After all, there is still the presence of the army, which seems to be more secure. But when these people heard that a giant mosquito monster had appeared in this village, and according to the last group of people who returned, this extremely powerful giant mosquito monster told them with his unique pronunciation method, "Will protect this village." The appearance of these words immediately made these people feel extremely excited. The fighting power of giant mosquito has been talked about by countless people since he appeared in front of the media. From the beginning, the little mosquito was just treated as a curiosity on TV, and then upgraded step by step, and finally became it has become a powerful creature that can rival metal monsters, and even surpass it in single combat power. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 323. Everyone knows that if protected by a giant mosquito monster, the safety of this village may even be higher than that of Shanghai. The combat effectiveness of Shanghai's army is getting lower and lower, and as a big city, Shanghai has the threat of red light. And in this dilapidated village, how could a metal monster be willing to use red light to attack? If we add the protection of the giant mosquito monster, even if this giant mosquito is not as powerful as those village survivors said, as long as it is as strong as the previous 6-meter giant mosquito, their chances of survival can be greatly improved. Some people were tempted and looked for the two killers one by one, expressing their intention to join the village. But seeing it is worth hearing it 100 times. When Jia Yan's huge body rode the cold wind in the night sky and landed quietly towards the dilapidated village, everyone else was finally moved. The people in this village didn't lie. There really was such a huge giant mosquito appearing, and this giant mosquito was really in this place, descending and stopping. People began to flock one by one to sign up for the recipients arranged by the two killers. Too many people have died in this village, and there are also a lot of vacant fields in the village. Now is the time when manpower is needed, so they will hardly refuse the addition of survivors from other villages. At this hot moment, the big mosquito's eye-catching huge body landed and slowly walked towards a house with relatively low damage. In all this, Jia Yan felt that everything seemed to be a little too in line with his own ideas. Some things, in Jia Yan's opinion, could not be perfect, but they were as simple as he imagined. Somehow, he always felt that something was wrong, but he just couldn't think of so many things. Maybe I forgot something. Or maybe there is something omitted. But we have already reached this point. Jia Yan will not give up. His family and two rare friends he made after his rebirth are all in this small village. Jia Yan can only immerse himself in it. Reborn until now. Jia Yan discovered that his values can be completely different from when he was a human being. When he was a human Jia Yan, he thought more about his future work and life. And studies, etc., but after rebirth. If you pluck out all the cocoons, you can know what he really cares about. In fact, they are family and friends. Of course, this refers to Jia Yan's values on interpersonal relationships. In fact, Jia Yan found that more of his focus had shifted to how to become stronger. And how to make your actions more consistent with your true intentions. Jia Yan doesn't know whether he will have distorted values in the future, but he thinks that he is still a person with a relatively stable mentality. If his mentality becomes unstable, it may be due to some special emergencies. Maybe so. In short, he won't let the people he cares about die, but he won't do anything drastic either. Mr. Giant Mosquito, you are back. Jia Yan walked to the house and was immediately greeted by someone inside. This was a man that Jia Yan saw in the crowd. When he saw Jia Yan's figure, he looked a little frightened, but he still came forward with his head in front of him. How are they? Jia Yan controls the brainwave power of his body and makes a sound. His voice was clear and full of deep power, but in this night sky that was close to midnight, it sounded a bit weird and chilling. They are all fine. But they were all a little weak because of the battle, and they all fell asleep. I am the night watchman. Do you need me to wake them up? The man's face turned pale with nervousness. Also, in this surrounded by dead bodies, his belly faced a terrifying giant mosquito monster, which would be a huge irritation to anyone's heart. Jia Yan shook his head. He had not slept for an unknown amount of time, and ended up forgetting that humans still need to sleep. No need, you can sleep, I'm here. When Jia Yan spoke, he felt that his stuttering was a little better. It seems that this method of using the power of brain waves to speak still needs more practice to improve. After he finished speaking, he directly found a ruins place near the house. With a few slender legs, he moved the ruins on the ground to one side with a little force, and then his body crawled down in the cleared space. Seeing the giant mosquito behave like this, the man's fear of the giant mosquito monster seemed to be slightly reduced. but he obviously wouldn't listen to Jia Yan's arrangement and really go to rest or something. So he just returned to the house. It was really cold outside. He went back to warm himself by the fire and perform his night watch duties. The smell of blood was everywhere in this village, and the night at this time was really cold. Only a few people were arranged to sort out things in the ruins. Near Jia Yan's body, some humans could be seen moving dead bodies. These dead bodies were everywhere in the ruins. Perhaps it was the first time for Jia Yan himself to be so close to so many human corpses. This made him feel deep in his heart. I don't know what kind of emotion is growing. There were faint sounds of crying in the surrounding areas, some of which were children's voices. It was also mixed with the painful groans of the injured people. Each of these people was injured in the war, but some of them even had their family members dead. There was no one to take care of them. They could only stay in the house arranged by the two killers, waiting for the ending of death or lucky survival. Jia Yan couldn't calm down as he listened to these subtle sounds and the cold wind around him. In short, this night is a kind of torture for everyone. But the people in this village are still lucky. Many villages like this around Shanghai City have been destroyed by metal monster attacks, and not even a single living person can be left. This may be the general public. The greatest tragedy in this era. Time passed quickly, and it came to the early morning when the sun was rising in the east. Jia Yan was lying on the ground, and he saw that there were more and more humans moving around him. This village has its own rules. Some of them were appointed as temporary field managers, while others were responsible for domestic waste management. In short, everyone has his or her own identity. And those newly joined personnel were also dispatched urgently to sort out things after the war in this village. The hot scene begins to appear gradually. However, no matter how busy these people were, no one dared to approach Jia Yan, the area where the big mosquito was. The 20-meter radius of this area seems to have become a restricted area. Human beings passing by will sometimes look at the large mosquitoes lying on the ground. In their compound eyes, there is a trace of light that seems to be able to absorb people. Take a bow. They may be grateful to this giant mosquito, but in this case, they dare not contact him. Even if Jia Yan shows that he can communicate, he can even speak human words, but this situation is also it's so weird, go to Shuyuan, it's a creature that no one can understand. No one dares to touch it rashly. But Jia Yan never thought about just contacting them. Those people are still working, a large number of people, doing things that Jia Yan may only need a few seconds to do. Such as moving the wood from the ruins and filling in the damaged ground. Actual transportation of dead bodies. Jia Yan just looked at the busy people. He was now like a bystander, watching these human beings who claimed to be the spirits of all things doing their work. He was thinking that maybe human beings are not so unique. They just have a little more wisdom than ordinary living beings, but what they are doing is just following biological instincts. Just like ants, the difference is that this race has a more complex social structure than ordinary ants, but their actions are still like independent individuals in each ant nest, spending their time doing nothing. What is life? If you compare a person's life to that of an ant, it would be really sad. However, this is the fact. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 324. Jia Yan jumped out of the human circle, but he was not grateful for this. Perhaps compared to himself, who is so powerful but so lonely now, he hopes that he is also one of these humans. Maybe he will simply die under the red light of the metal monster, but at least there is someone to see him off, someone will feel sad or indulged for him. Mr. Giant Mosquito. Hello. Just when Jia Yan was looking at those busy humans, there was a clear voice behind him. Jia Yan looked back and found that the girl behind him was his sister, Jia Lin. This girl didn't suffer much trauma yesterday, so except that she doesn't look very good now, she has regained her original vitality. Hello. Jia Yan's voice, illuminated by the bright and comfortable sunshine in the early morning, had a somewhat pleasant sound to it. So what if we are no longer human? It is not impossible that he has become close to his former family again, and may even become a member of the family. But when this idea appeared, Jia Yan felt an impossible feeling in his heart. But this impossible feeling was severely suppressed by himself. He doesn't want much, he just wants a little feeling of being alive and a sense of presence that makes his family worried. He has had enough of loneliness and loneliness. As long as he works hard, nothing is impossible in the world. He could transform from that little pond mosquito into such a powerful supergiant mosquito. What else is impossible? It's just that I'm with my old family. I'm familiar with them, and they're familiar with my personality. This kind of small wish is nothing compared to the process of becoming stronger, right? The more Jia Yan thought about it, the sadness in his heart became stronger. His family was clearly in front of him, but deep in his heart, there seemed to be a big hole. Unable to heal. Mr. Giant Mosquito. Our idea is to dig a defensive pit under this village to accommodate everyone in the village. And with your presence, the main part of the village does not need to be placed on the mountain, but should be placed at the foot of the mountain. The transportation and terrain there are more suitable for development. At noon, the sun is hot. It's similar to the sunlight above your head. This dilapidated mountain village also has a lot of excitement. Because most of the former residents have died. The newly joined people did not have much sadness, but were under the command of a few senior officials. A lot of fortification work going on. The bearded man's physical injuries were quite serious due to several red light attacks, so now a young man wearing glasses is directing the work. Although he was also frightened by the big mosquito in front of him. But compared to others, it's already much better. He was explaining his work to Jia Yan. Just one night. A lot of work details can be summarized. This former killer has obviously fully developed his talents in other areas. Jia Yan didn't have much to say. He just expressed his knowledge. At the same time, he also understood that the other party was just respecting his wishes and showing the things to him. In fact, he was just an insignificant person in this heated scene. It just exists. After watching for a while, Jia Yan finally gave up in this ruined village. In this place, although he was very close to his family, and his younger sister Jia Lin was still very attached to him, he always felt that the distance was getting farther and farther. The little sister is okay, but her parents don't treat her like a relative. The feeling of being a parent before was definitely not like this. Jia Yan was a little overwhelmed, spread his wings and flew into the blue sky. The earth is still the same earth. The forest is still the same forest, but the artistic conception this sky brings to Jia Yan is completely different. It turns out that what he always felt was wrong was that his family made him feel different. It seems that I have asked for too many things. Without getting close to my family, I just want to see them again. Once I have met them once, I want to see them more. After I have met them several times, I want to be like them. We lived together like that before, but this is simply impossible. I am already a giant mosquito monster, and I can't explain to them that I am the Jia Yan of the past. If this continues, I will only sink deeper. It will be a harm to my family and myself. Jia Yan was bathed in the sunshine, and the height of his flight reached 10,000 meters. Flying higher and higher, his body began to feel cold under the situation, but this temperature had no effect at all on Jia Yan. Arriving at a height of 10,000 meters, Jia Yan looked at the scenery below. At an altitude of 10,000 meters, the earth seems to have an obvious curvature. All the scenery on the earth is so small that it is almost negligible. The killings on the earth, as well as a lot of sorrow and pain, as well as the kind of human tragedies that can affect Jia Yan, seem to be impossible to see in this place. Every single human being looks so insignificant from such a high place. On the ground, only those large buildings can be seen clearly from this place. There are familiar sounds and feelings all around. Jia Yan changed his flying posture, sometimes flying sideways, sometimes flying with his head downward, and sometimes as if breaking away from the gravity of the earth, using the power of brain waves to barely lift his body and fly in the sky. Everything in the world seems to be less full of troubles in this kind of careless flight. He is constantly traveling in the world he is familiar with. Not long after, Jia Yan also thought about it. He has experienced so many things, why can't he understand such a simple truth? Even if he can no longer live with his family as before, he just needs to remember that he is still a member of the Geo family. Sometimes, it's really not good to go too far. Compared with that uncomfortable feeling, he still feels that flying in the sky now, with no scruples and debauchery, this kind of flying without any discomfort, is the most comfortable. What a fool! What are you thinking about? Besides, I'm already a big mosquito. It's too much to ask my family to accept me like before. In fact, it's something that you can understand when you think about it. It's strange that Jia Yan needs to untie his knot at this time. He finally solved everything he was thinking about, but just when Jia Yan relaxed his mind and wanted to continue returning to the small mountain village, Jia Yan's compound eyes suddenly felt a thrill when he looked at the earth. What is that? Jia Yan suddenly straightened his flying posture. He looked at the scene below, and other thoughts in his heart were suddenly thrown away. This scenery is so generous. Jia Yan looked at the things below and felt incredible. At an altitude of 10,000 meters, metal monsters gathered together and walked towards the distance with neat steps. These metal monsters, one after another, their number seems to be connected to the horizon, no one knows how many there are. When Jia Yan looked at these metal monsters, they also saw his body flying in the sky. Jia Yan's body is at an altitude of 10,000 meters, but his huge appearance, comparable to that of a human civil aviation aircraft, is eye-catching enough. Even at an altitude of 10,000 meters, his body was completely uncovered and appeared in front of all the metal monsters. Just when I saw Jia Yan, this big mosquito, those metal monsters who were uniform and marching in the same pace seemed to be ordered by someone. Their movements were so neat that no human soldier could do it. All of a sudden, all the metal monsters were monster. With a click sound, all the metal monsters moved together, making a neat sound without any lag. In almost less than a second, all the metal monsters were standing on the ground. Some of them were walking on the road, and some were moving in the mountains, but their movements stopped in an instant. What a terrifying mobility! All the metal monsters that stopped walking were like a large silver ocean. 2 seconds later, all the metal monsters suddenly made neat movements together again. They raised their heads. Boom 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 boom. Thousands of arrows fired. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 325. The entire Earth was illuminated by red light, which suppressed the sunlight and eclipsed it. The sight of thousands of arrows shooting out is like a red flower blooming, it is simply dazzling. Those red rays of light obviously contain the maximum amount of energy. Every time they bloom, they consume a lot of energy from the metal monsters, greatly increasing the possibility of them shutting down. But so many metal monsters still made the decision to attack with maximum energy at this time. Jia Yan is flying at an altitude of 10,000 meters, looking at the scenery on the ground. He was shocked when he was attacked by these metal monsters. After that, fighting spirit appeared in his compound eyes instantly. The route of these metal monsters is heading towards that small mountain village. There was nothing in that small mountain village that was worth such a big fight, so he thought that these metal monsters were probably following his tracks and heading towards him. Although I don't know why they know where they are, each of these metal monsters is an extremely powerful monster. For ordinary humans, one is deadly enough. However, in this area now, there are tens of thousands of metal monsters. If they were allowed to pass, wouldn't it be a disaster for their parents and little sister? Jia Yan made a decision instantly. We can't attract them near a small mountain village. He can't defeat tens of thousands of metal monsters alone, so he should attract them to other places. The real speed of the red light below is not as exaggerated as the light, but it is still far faster than Jia Yan's speed. These rays of light seem to be that kind of extremely terrifying red life-threatening light, heading straight towards the high sky where Jia Yan was, covering the sky and the ground. Tens of thousands of attacks, at this time, each one is an extremely terrifying and destructive invincible weapon, and they are combined together. The light of death blooms. It would horrify anyone. Jia Yan couldn't resist it, and De Fune's aircraft couldn't resist it. Jia Yan even felt that nothing could resist such a huge amount of red light. The huge body of the giant mosquito. Among these countless rays of light, it seems to be insignificant. Speed up. Use the fastest speed I can use now. Jia Yan suddenly. Use the most powerful force to flap your wings. At the same time, his brainwave power was also suddenly used. The two superimposed on each other, making him faster. Reaching an extreme that is unimaginable. Boom 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 boom. The big mosquito's body suddenly broke through a limit at this time. Twice the speed of sound. Twice the speed of sound. 5 times the speed of sound. 10 times the speed of sound. 12 times the speed of sound. 15 times the speed of sound. The giant mosquito is in this desperate situation of life and death. He actually burst out in one breath with the most powerful speed that had never been unleashed before. In an instant, it exceeded 15 times the speed of sound. His speed is what it used to be. It had never exceeded 10 times the speed of sound, but at this time, it suddenly exceeded 15 times the speed of sound that had never been imagined. This is still a big mosquito. If the instant burst of power can continue to provide inertial force, maybe this value will continue to increase. But at this time, Jia Yan had no time to think about his speed. At this moment, dozens of red lasers attacked his body. Puff 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 puff. A dull voice sounded on Jia Yan's body. At this time, his body suddenly appeared a little blue. The red light is no longer such a threat to Jia Yan, but if there are too many, it will consume a lot of his defensive power, and at this time, the metal monster uses the most powerful energy to activate the red light. So it was a bit difficult for him to resist dozens of attacks in one breath. But this was the most correct judgment Jia Yan made in an instant. Very good. I hit the place where the red light is the rarest. If I hadn't hit Fang Wei, there would have been more red light in other places. The body's defense is still enough, so let's continue like this. Jia Yan's body made a spinning movement in the air. Puff 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 puff. Dozens more attacks descended on his body. But behind these dozens of attacks, hundreds of rays of light shuttled past. Jia Yan relied on his amazing dynamic vision and powerful computing power after mutation to hit these dozens of attacks. Because this is the place with the least red light nearby. Under the heavy load of calculations, his brain experienced some intense pain. But I can't control so much at this time. Perhaps due to the brainwave training, Jia Yan found that his brain's computing power was definitely many times stronger than before. Under this crisis, he unleashed all his computing power and detection capabilities. The whole world seemed to him, as if time has slowed down. This feeling had appeared before when he was weak, but it was definitely not as exaggerated as it is now. Jia Yan only felt that those rapid-fire attacks became extremely slow, but in contrast, he felt that his body also became extremely slow. At this time, his body seemed to be so slow. It was like a slow-motion movie was being filmed. From every angle, he was screaming in his mind, but he only moved a little bit as he wanted. Even if it is slow, he still needs to move, otherwise, his body defense will definitely be hit by those large-scale red lights. Boom 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 boom. The big mosquito suddenly exploded with powerful flying speed in the sky, and its body became much more agile. Like a dexterous fish swimming among tens of thousands of red rays of light. His body was so smooth that it seemed that he was not a 10-meter monster, but rather like a small mosquito that was so flexible that it was as if it was cheating. The metal monsters below are not just a wave of human artillery fire, but their red light can be fired almost non-stop. Just because it is necessary to maintain the maximum power, the interval between each launch requires a short 2-second interval. It is this interval that has become the biggest life-saving talisman for mosquitoes. They cannot organize tens of thousands of attacks again at the same time. Jia Yan continues to shuttle through countless red rays of light. At the same time, in the human observation institutions, everyone was extremely horrified to discover the difference in the sky. Compared with the dilapidation of ground facilities, in space where metal monsters cannot reach, countless human aircraft are still operating, and some are even detectors specifically targeted at metal monsters that were launched only after the war began. At this time, each of these detectors detected that an incredible battle was taking place not far from Shanghai City. What's going on? There is a different reaction on the radar. How is it possible with such a huge energy and heat source? Some personnel involved in the monitoring facilities were extremely horrified when they saw the scene in front of them. The scale of this energy. Find bookstore. It exceeds many battles tested before, and it is also better than the light emitted by the huge red light of those metal monsters when shooting. But at this time, they may not be able to imagine that the truth behind these energy flashes is that the giant mosquito monster is fighting tens of thousands of metal monsters. Finally, the radar monitoring station cooperated with the satellite to convey the picture. Oh my God! That giant mosquito was fighting the metal monster yesterday. The moment everyone saw the scene, they felt like they were going to stop breathing. The giant mosquito in the picture occupies most of the picture, but underneath his body is completely a silver ocean. All are metal monsters. How many of these metal monsters are there? It's unimaginable that each of these people thought about the sight of the metal monsters that had fought with humans in Shanghai City before, seeing giant mosquitoes breaking through the sky, landing downwards, and then receding like a tide. They immediately understood that the metal monsters had given up attacking the Shanghai Stock Exchange and were actually going to deal with this giant mosquito monster. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 326. Everyone was extremely horrified. Could this scene mean that this new giant mosquito monster was fighting against tens of thousands of metal monsters? A single challenge costs tens of thousands. Is this guy's combat power really so terrifying? The screen continues to pass, showing the battle between the metal monster and the giant mosquito. Contact the higher UPS immediately. The higher UPS must know about this matter. The personnel at the monitoring station were extremely excited. The scene of a large-scale battle between giant mosquitoes and metal monsters was in the interests of mankind. And from the looks of several pictures, the supergiant mosquito was actually among tens of thousands of metal monsters. Under the combined attack, he survived, and even his body was not seriously injured. This shows that humans have miscalculated the combat effectiveness of giant mosquito monsters. Their individual combat effectiveness is simply off the charts. The personnel at these observation stations all had excited faces. This picture represented not only the fighting power of giant mosquitoes, but also showed that the scene of giant mosquitoes fighting metal monsters that humans had been looking forward to had really appeared. If the giant mosquito race really launches an all-out war with the metal monsters, then humanity's breathing space will be greatly increased. So they were extremely excited. So this news was passed on by these people with great excitement. Not only China, but other powerful countries also have their own observation satellites. Although under normal circumstances, they will not make such a move to detect China, but now is a time of life and death for mankind, and the metal monster and Jia Yan's the battle was too noisy. It's hard for them not to notice it. So each of these people saw the battle on the ground. For a time, the crowd was excited. All humans who saw the scene thought that this was a sign of a real war between the giant mosquito monster race and the metal monster race. And you can tell just by looking at the way that giant mosquito is still intact despite being attacked and sniped by tens of thousands of metal monsters. The fighting power of the giant mosquito monster. It's definitely not as simple as humans thought before. The giant mosquito monster has destroyed the faith of many biologists on the Earth long ago, and now his fighting power has directly destroyed many related biologists. Everyone was stunned and couldn't believe it. A giant mosquito that used to be 6 meters tall. It's already unimaginably powerful. Biologists all concluded that even in the best evolutionary environment, creatures that have the right time, place, and people are all in the same place. Only then could he evolve to the level of being as terrifying as a giant mosquito, otherwise even if he had a body of 6 meters. It's impossible to have such a powerful fighting force. Otherwise, wouldn't all the elephants on the Earth be super elephants? The previous 6-meter giant mosquito had already eluded biologists. And the 10-meter giant mosquito that appears now has this fighting power. This made the biologists stare at the progress of the war one by one, unable to speak for a long time. Facing such a powerful monster, it is no longer something that these biologists can explain. They can only say one thing: this monster comes from the universe. It may be a cosmic monster, which cannot be explained by the biology of the Earth. But what they don't know is that the giant mosquitoes in front of them are actually real Earth creatures, and they are the kind of blood-sucking mosquitoes that humans are extremely familiar with. Perhaps if this fact were known to biologists, many people would go crazy. Because how could a small mosquito grow to a size of 10 meters? This thing will boggle the mind of all biologists and cannot be explained. Many countries observed this scene, and some impatient media began to report it. Humanity now needs good news so much. If the fighting power of giant mosquitoes and the role they can play can be exaggerated and publicized, many desperate people will find the courage to survive again. Of course, human observation cannot affect both sides in the battle. Humans have no need to help the giant mosquitoes for the time being, and Jia Yan doesn't need their help either. Boom 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 boom. On the surface of the giant mosquito's body, bursts of red fire suddenly appeared. His body seemed to be on fire. After the raging flames, the huge body of the giant mosquito was reborn from the flames. A huge ball of flame breaks out and flies higher into the sky. That's right. Jia Yan is fighting 1 against 10,000. For the metal monsters below, the higher Jia Yan flies, the worse their accuracy becomes. Moreover, Jia Yan's body is also extremely fast. Attack after attack consumes a lot of energy from the metal monsters, and each one is lost. The metal monster with all its power began to stop in place without any movement. These metal monsters that have lost energy have other metal monsters coming to pull them. Maybe they have the means to replenish energy. However, if one loses energy, it means that there are no two attacking metal monsters at once. As time goes by, however, the pressure on Jia Yan began to decrease. At this time, he had led those metal monsters at least 10 kilometers away from the original fighting place. Jia Yan's body was all azure at this time. Even he could not remain intact despite the continuous ground-to-air sniping attacks by tens of thousands of metal monsters. But he did not choose to use his flying advantage to leave this area directly. Instead, he attracted all the metal monsters to other places. Because that direction is the direction of the small mountain village. If he leaves like that, there is no guarantee that these metal monsters will go there and massacre the people in the village. Jia Yan had done well enough, when he finally withstood another attack of hundreds of red lights. Boom boom boom. His exposed antennae and ears made him feel like he was spinning. He was already a little exhausted trying to avoid attacks before, so in this situation, he was hit by hundreds of attacks without even noticing. It hurts. This is enough. Jia Yan is in the sky, his compound eyes are even more lustrous. He is looking at the scenery below. Jia Yan has never been a person who just passively takes beatings. The formation of the metal monsters has become chaotic, and even the teams in front and behind have stretched a long distance. The metal monster at the back has been taken 5 kilometers away by him. In this situation, if Jia Yan cannot seize the opportunity to fight back, is he still him? It hurt him, and these metal monsters also dropped a piece of flesh. Jia Yan's advantage is definitely speed. And he can fly in the sky. If these metal monsters didn't kill him on the first encounter, he would have left long ago if he wanted to. But now he doesn't want to leave. It took a lot of effort to drag tens of thousands of metal monsters into this state. In the red light that fills the sky, Jia Yan sprints at top speed. His speed is so fast. And in the sky where the metal monsters are, they are constantly going back and forth, no one knows what he is thinking. If he just wanted to escape, he would have been able to escape long ago, but he still kept intersecting. The formation of metal monsters below is even more chaotic. And there are more individual metal monsters that have lost energy. Countless attacks from the ground turned into a small giant mosquito in the sky, firing attacks continuously. However, the accuracy of the metal monster's red light shots was extremely poor. Jia Yan's body was in a higher place, except for the frequent attacks due to the metal monsters covering shots, except for being bombarded. Basically their attacks pose little threat to the giant mosquitoes. It's now sudden. Jia Yan seems to have discovered some good opportunity. His body is already at an altitude of 11 kilometers, that is, 11 kilometers. However, considering Jia Yan's speed, this distance would make him fall to the ground in an instant. The speed exceeds the speed of sound by more than 10 times, and when it dives, it can go even faster. Jia Yan covered the front of his head with his brainwave power. This is the most efficient way of flying he discovered after flying in the air several times. Now, he is not so comfortable with the precision of brainwave power, so after arriving on Earth, he did a targeted study on the improvement of his brainwave power for flying. During the previous rapid flight, Jia Yan had already discovered that if he put the power of his brainwaves in front of his head, it would form a streamlined shape similar to the air-braking front section of an airplane in dynamics, and his resistance would be greatly reduced. It's extremely fast to swoop like this. Boom 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 boom. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 327. Seeking genuine subscription. The sound of the huge body cutting through the air resounded throughout the world. His body was so fast. The speed of the dive suddenly exceeded 20 times the speed of sound. The scenery in front of me is quickly getting closer to the ground. A distance of more than 10 kilometers, at a speed of 20 times the speed of sound, only takes a second or two. When those metal monsters discover Jia Yan's actions, the giant mosquito has already used his extremely arrogant body to plunge into a gathering point outside the metal monster. Boom! A huge bang, like a meteorite hitting the ground, resounded through the sky at that place. A mushroom cloud formed by a violent shockwave slowly rose in that area. It's actually not much different from the explosive power of a powerful missile. Horrible. And in this huge explosive mushroom cloud, Jia Yan's arrogant body was like a general rushing forward bravely. At this time, he suddenly rushed out of the explosion. This huge explosion was actually just the huge impact force caused by the ground after he hit it. All the metal monsters in that area were affected by the explosion. At the moment before the impact, he used all his strength to protect his body. As a result, there was an explosion. Jia Yan also suffered a huge force shock, but the body's own defense and the help of the brainwave power, he actually managed to withstand the damage completely. The impact of the big mosquito caused the loss of at least hundreds of metal monsters. The place where he hit was the area with the highest concentration of metal monsters. It is not surprising to have this effect. Giant mosquitoes fly only a few meters above the ground. With his flying speed, flying so low in the air is almost an extreme. If you are not careful, you will hit a cliff or a protruding ground. You need to pay attention to the front every second. It can be said to be extremely stressful. But in this case, Jia Yan's shining compound eyes still had a strange light. In this situation, he would often move his body violently like a bird of prey to catch prey. Just extremely fast. Suddenly it descends and lifts its front legs or mouth parts. Attack the enemy. His tail needle also worked, sometimes it would be drawn down violently, although it was impossible to control it finally. But it can pierce several metal monsters in one go. Boom boom boom. At this time, the giant mosquito went crazy. His speed is so fast. The metal monsters have used covering shots. But he was too close to the ground, and the attacks were due to the terrain. Either because he couldn't catch up, in short he could really attack Jia Yan. Just a little bit. Crazy. In one fell swoop, they were killing 7 in and 7 out. Jia Yan's massive attack, in this case, the metal monster was actually unable to effectively defend against it. Invincible. Phew. Phew. But Jia Yan's body is at this time. He has also withstood many attacks, and the surface color of his body has now turned into an extremely dazzling blue. The color of the big mosquito in the sky changes from black to blue, as if from a simple and low key to a dazzling high key, extremely gorgeous. The battle is also extremely gorgeous. Even ordinary people can't understand it at all. Too fast. An object flying at a speed above the speed of sound, even if its speed is reduced because it is flying at low altitude on the ground, is still about 1 km per second in this area. It is faster than the speed of ordinary human bullets. At such a speed, people at a close distance can only see a huge figure flying by, but they cannot see clearly what it is. Jia Yan's flying speed is now beyond the reach of almost all flying instruments on Earth. Next is the metal monster gathering group over there. It seems that there are almost more than 5,000 metal monsters there. If I cut them vertically and horizontally, it is likely to cause great damage. The light in Jia Yanfu's eyes was shining. At this time, his body directly had great fighting motivation. Perhaps this motivation is the reason why the mutated body is more powerful, or maybe this motivation is because his family is behind and he is fighting for his family. Anyway, he is extremely active now. In just a few minutes, at least thousands of metal monsters died under his rapid strikes. If it weren't for such a huge number, Jia Yan's suppression of the metal monsters' combat power would not be on the same level at all. Just look at the current speed comparison between Jia Yan and the metal monster, you can tell. The two are no longer comparable. Jia Yan's speed is completely beyond the reach of these metal monsters. As long as his speed is not restricted, even if the opponent uses a covering attack, he will only suffer some minor injuries. Of course, Jia Yan's defense is also an important factor in why he is so strong today. Under the vertical and horizontal cutting, Jia Yan's combat power, at least the combat power he can unleash now, has been fully demonstrated. It's absolutely terrifying. Calculating the maximum damage his body could withstand, and then calculating his physical strength, Jia Yan headed towards the huge center point where another metal monster gathered. He wants to keep killing. It's best to kill these metal monsters until they are scared. Although it is unlikely to scare them into retreat, it can effectively wipe out the active force of nearby metal monsters on a large scale. Jia Yan flew towards the battle group that gathered more than 5,000 metal monsters. The more than 5,000 metal monsters over there, under Jia Yan's previous kite-flying tactics, have put a huge distance away from other metal monsters, at least a little more than a kilometer apart. Jia Yan flew over. Because he was not flying high, it was impossible for other metal monsters to provide fire support to these metal monsters when the battle group was raging. If they didn't come to help, Jia Yan might even be able to completely kill these 5,000 metal monsters when his defense and physical strength were exhausted. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The body of the big mosquito flew towards that area with the sound of biting wind. Right at this moment, all of a sudden, Jia Yan suddenly felt a sudden thrill in his brain. It was like a stream of cool cold water suddenly poured on his body, causing his slightly crazy figure to suddenly stagnate. Bo. That is this moment of pause. A huge red light, like a terrifying light shooting down from the sky. It seems to come from hell. It was as thick as a human being and was so eye-catchingly red that it seemed to be the same color as blood. It's the weird red light in the building built by the metal monster. They are also the most powerful weapons on Earth among metal monsters. Jia Yan was shocked for a moment. Fortunately, when his head twitched before, his speed had been slowed down. Now with his extremely fast reaction speed, he saw this red light that seemed to come from the sky. Finally, he was flapping his wings crazily and dodging to the side and behind. Boom boom boom. The attack of red light makes a vivid sound in front of you. This sound is impossible for light to have, but this red light seems to contain powerful explosive material, so when they launch it, they also have sound. The red light rubbed Jia Yan's body and swept across quickly. Jia Yan's heart was beating so fast that his powerful heart almost jumped out of his chest. He could feel that the attack from this energy was based on the size of his defense strength. If one is not careful, he may be hit by the red light and die without any accident. But this frightening feeling. Cool. The light in Jia Yanfu's eyes was extremely bright. He stared at a distant place, and seemed to be able to see through the distant air, tens or even hundreds of kilometers away, where a very tall building built by a metal monster flashed red, as if it would attack again at any time. Jia Yan's body pressed down further onto the ground. By the way, he easily dealt with the metal monster that was close to him. He believed that this attack could not be just one time, otherwise, it would not have attacked him at such a critical time. Maybe it's just to pave the way for the next attack. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito author, Bulletin U. Chapter 328. To be honest, Jia Yan did feel a little scared, because the timing of the attack of this red light was so good. Attack while he was already going crazy and almost impatient to deal with the 5,000 metal monsters. If he had relaxed his vigilance a little at that time and not cared so much about his instinctive reactions, then he would have turned into a corpse under the attack of red light now. A huge red light shot on the ground, and first a huge red burst out. Then a huge explosion sounded. This red light has great explosive power. Jia Yan deeply knows that this red light is an extremely powerful force that can wipe out a city. If he is accidentally affected by the force of the explosion, he will be unable to eat anything. So in this situation, Jia Yan's lowered figure accelerated his escape even more. The shock wave of the explosion behind him made a thunderous sound, and he chased after him. Jia Yan's speed suddenly accelerated to his limit, but he still couldn't match the power of the shock wave behind him. But just when Jia Yan paid attention to the rear, the strong sense of crisis in his mind appeared again. This time the sense of crisis comes from that distant building. That building was so far away that Jia Yan couldn't even see it. But it was able to accurately aim at Jia Yan and then launch the attack. Compared to the half-assed shooting accuracy of the metal monster, that's a huge difference. However, Jia Yan's body, at this time, has already received feedback from the crisis awareness in his mind. As mentioned before, this feedback of crisis consciousness is not actually that magical. It emerges only after the creature senses the emergence of danger through various organs. Therefore, Even if Jia Yan does not know where he is now, I saw the picture of crisis. But there must be something. It made his body instinctively aware of danger. If there was something that could hide the feedback from his biological organs, then killing him would not be difficult. It's a pity that this red light is present. Still can't do such a thing. With this rear shockwave pursuing, the distant red light strikes again. Bo! A sharp red light. In an instant, it crossed the distant sky and headed towards Jia Yan. Coming to shoot. Jia Yan only felt the alarm ringing in his heart. The moment of life and death seemed to have made his brain unable to react. The lethality of red light is simply too exaggerated. There is no way Jia Yan can confront it head-on. But the explosion shockwave from behind also came in a violent way. If Jia Yan is involved, he will at least end up injured. At this moment, the big mosquito's compound eyes appeared. Not only did that strange light not go out, but it became even more intense. At this moment, he suddenly moved. It hit the ground head-on. During the collision, an unprecedentedly powerful brainwave force appeared in front of his body. When used, it was like an awl, with an extremely sharp front end. This is the embodiment of Jia Yan's greatest achievement in space navigation. Being able to condense the power of brainwaves to such an extent, he is already considered a capable user of brainwave power. What's more, the total amount of his brainwave power is infinitely more powerful than the brainwave power users described in those textbooks. At this time, he seemed extremely calm in his heart, as if no matter whether it was a volcanic eruption or the end of the world outside, there was still a calm lake in his heart, extremely calm. Jia Yan doesn't know if this is his talent, but at this time, he needs to be calm. On the way down, Jia Yan felt the desire in his heart for this life and death battle and the satisfaction with this battle. He knew that his previous battles had made him completely fall in love with the feeling of fighting, and also the feeling of dancing in death. Jia Yan felt that he could no longer escape the fate of fighting. If he didn't fight for several months like in a spacecraft, he would almost feel rusty. For a moment, his mood didn't seem to be in the battle where his life was hanging by a thread. He was even wandering around, thinking about other aspects. This is not because the current battle is not intense enough, but because he has not fought for a long time and seems to be out of shape. But fortunately, he didn't enter the situation and still got the greatest chance of survival in this thin line of life and death. He hit the ground head-on. The huge body, first a sharp object in front of the body, came into contact with the soil. The terrain here is not that hard. But it's not a place where big mosquitoes can easily penetrate if they want to. Boom! Jia Yan only felt a huge roar next to his tentacle ears, and then he felt that his body suddenly penetrated into the ground with the downward force of inertia. Drill me harder! Jia Yan used his most powerful brainwave power, which created a huge sharp barrier in front of his body. Puff puff! The power of the explosion above his head swept over his body like a breeze. He felt the earth shaking. Someone seemed to have punched him hard on the back, and Jia Yan could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The bright red blood stains are extremely eye-catching in this underground place. The shock wave above his head continued, and waves of extremely powerful explosions were waving in the sky above his head. Jia Yan waited for about a minute, then controlled his body and reluctantly climbed up. During this time, he felt a little exhausted. The surface of his body was a dazzling blue color. Moreover, on the surface of the body, bits and pieces of exoskeleton fragments were peeling off and falling downwards. It seemed that some parts of the exoskeleton automatically detached after becoming weak due to attacks. It is simply extremely miserable. But Jia Yan thinks it's normal. He fought this battle so happily. The body of the giant mosquito slowly crawled out of the ground amid the dust in the sky. The depth of the underground space he drilled into with impact inertia reached a depth of 20 meters. In the previous red light attack, after he hit underground, he shot to a place about 1 kilometer away, but the huge explosion power still made the ground here seem to be pear-shaped. The ground was originally a small plain-like area, but now it is completely flat. The underground space he dug was almost flattened. If he had drilled not 20 meters, but 15 meters, he might still be affected by the red light attack, and he might be seriously injured now. How scary! Fortunately, in addition to flying into the sky and into the sea, I can also burrow into the ground. Jia Yan looked at the scene in front of him and his head shrank slightly in fear. It would have been a bit dangerous if he hadn't had an idea and drilled underground at the critical moment of crisis. Jia Yan has always believed in the effectiveness of his exoskeleton defense, especially the blue defense, which saved him countless times before. But now, he found that Azure defense seemed to be having a little difficulty facing this level of attack. But now their attack has passed. I must be careful and to escape from this battlefield. Jia Yan looked at the smoke around him. After the huge explosion, most of the metal monsters around him were dead. Even those who were alive were missing arms and legs. The fragments of the metal monster on the ground are everywhere. A metal monster was struggling on the ground. It was missing a leg. It was extremely lucky. But just as it was about to get up, one of its huge long legs had already fallen down. Click. With a sound, this huge long foot trampled this metal monster into pieces. In the past, metal monsters that were unparalleled in front of humans were simply the lowest level of consumables in a battle of this level, and were not even worthy of mentioning. Jia Yan's compound eyes were dim, looking at the scenery behind him through the smoke. In that place, there still seemed to be a shining eye, looking at him coldly. Reborn as an Interstellar Giant Mosquito author, Bulletin U. Chapter 329. With the smoke and dust blocking it, the building should not be able to attack me at this time, Jia Yan made a judgment. And the reason why I looked so dangerous in the previous attack was because I was relatively low to the ground and there were very few routes and ways to avoid it. If I flew high, he would be unlikely to force me into this situation again. Jia Yan looked behind him. After the huge explosion, smoke and dust were still flying all over the sky. The dazzling flames also ignited the entire forest. The flames burned extremely horribly. At this time, Jia Yan could take advantage of the smoke and flames to leave quickly. Thinking of this, Jia Yan flapped his wings and flew up from the ground. Although he is less afraid of red light at high altitudes, there are still countless metal monsters on the ground at this time. If he flies up, he will once again fall into the same predicament surrounded by thousands of attacks. If the red light continues to take the opportunity to attack him together, he will fall into the next crisis. Therefore, Jia Yan did not dare to fly high at this time. Instead, he avoided the large army of metal monsters, chose a direction where metal monsters were rare, and flew forward. This is a battle without a winner. Although Jia Yan killed more than 1,000 metal monsters, the red light even tried to deal with it in the end, which may have affected nearby metal monsters, causing the death of at least 2,000 to 3,000 metal monsters. But Jia Yan himself was also slightly injured, and his defense was almost at its limit. Otherwise, how could he choose to retreat now? It seems that Jia Yan has won a big victory, but the actual situation is not like that. The giant mosquito's body flew quietly away from a sparsely surrounded circle of metal monsters. Even if there is someone blocking the way, kill him quickly. At a speed that other metal monsters could not react, his huge figure had disappeared into the horizon. Although Jia Yan thought that he was just tied with the opponent, the humans who had been observing the battle did not think so. His fighting prowess. In this case, it simply makes all human beings extremely horrified. Powerful. What a powerful creature this is. When observing this battle, the humans did not expect it. They actually witnessed such an epic battle. Just a giant mosquito monster. Human beings have thought that even if this monster can escape, it will at most be through its own advantage of being able to fly. Escape in heaven. The one before could contain countless metal monsters in tens of thousands of red rays of light. The shadows passing back and forth already made their jaws drop in shock. But then, the giant mosquito monster appeared on the screen. The attack actually reached the ground. In one fell swoop, he used his speed that was almost faster than any human aircraft to kill the metal monster to pieces. How powerful this is! But such a powerful giant mosquito. There will definitely be trouble next. That is the real ultimate weapon of the metal monster, the red light attack from the metal monster building. Humanity has already understood the attack pattern of this red light in previous battles, that is, if it encounters a strong force threat. Or if there is a huge loss of metal monsters in the battle, then the building built by the metal monster will emit that kind of red light. These rays of light also exist like Shangfang's sword above human heads. They know that even if they can defeat the metal monsters on the ground, they cannot defeat the red light of those metal monsters, and humans have no chance of winning. But the giant mosquito monster uses its own strength to tell humans that these red rays of light are not invincible. He actually forced those buildings to use 2 red lights in succession. And the power of these 2 rays of light will definitely not be less than the power they use to attack the city. This shows that the presence in those buildings judged the threat of this giant mosquito monster to be no smaller than a huge human city. Even much bigger. And this is also true. Human cities will not move. If a red light comes over, they will become ruins. But that giant mosquito monster, with such a huge body, is extremely flexible. At that moment, no one knew how the giant mosquito monster avoided the red light attack. After all, satellites are used to detect battles on the ground, and no satellite of any country has captured this kind of battle scene that occurs in an instant. They only saw that under the metal monster's unstoppable attack, the metal monster actually reappeared in the smoke and flames, like an immortal phoenix, reborn from the ashes. This. People looked at the sight of this giant mosquito leaving the battlefield gracefully, and they were all extremely frightened. This giant mosquito just changed its appearance from dark to blue. With just this change, it was able to kill so many metal monsters. What's even more frightening is that not only did he do this among tens of thousands of metal monsters, and still survived the inexplicable huge red light of the metal monster. No one can imagine such power. Quickly, report this battle. No. It's a battle. Report the results of this battle to the leaders above. I think they will also be very happy. A leader of the observation station, who was not among the observing crowd, is now crowded with the observing crowd, with a very excited face. They witnessed an epic battle. Although the results of this battle were not created by humans, they can still be very happy. Because of the appearance of the giant mosquito monster, the metal monster not only stopped attacking the Shanghai Stock Exchange, but now he alone has ravaged the tens of thousands of metal monsters to the point of almost collapse, even those humans who have no means of defense. The huge red light, the giant mosquito also defended itself. Who had thought of such a thing before? Only the giant mosquito himself might have expected something similar. On the human side, just knowing that this giant mosquito can fight with metal monsters is already an extremely surprising situation. No one dares to imagine that the combat power of this giant mosquito can rival tens of thousands of metal monsters. What humans originally thought was that if this giant mosquito could fight the metal monster, it would then trigger a battle between the giant mosquito and the metal monster as a whole. In this case, no matter who wins or loses between the two halves, mankind can get some rest. But what I didn't expect was, this metal monster can cause such a large-scale battle result. One can match tens of thousands or even more metal monsters in combat power. If such giant mosquitoes are really on the side of humans, then humans' chances of survival can be greatly increased. So they need to pass on their news. Such news is really very satisfying. The giant mosquito monster that descended last night fought a fierce battle with tens of thousands of metal monsters more than 100 kilometers away from Shanghai. Although they had the upper hand, they were forced to retreat due to the attack of two huge red rays of light. On the combat effectiveness of giant mosquito monsters and the possibility of them going to war with metal monsters. This is the next day, and all the articles urgently printed in the newspaper are descriptions and analyses of this unprecedented battle. Since most of the media and lines have been cut off, please, humanity has returned to an era when news was basically obtained from newspapers. And this news, through newspapers and various media, is like growing wings and flying all over the world. Everyone is in amazement and has hope. The war between giant mosquito monsters and metal monsters seems to have existed since history. Some people even said that when the metal monster appeared in the Japanese country, it had already fought with a giant mosquito monster at that time. And the enmity between the giant mosquito and the metal monster was followed by many media outlets. From the descriptions of each battle, it seems that everyone can see that there is simply an sworn hatred between the metal monster and the giant mosquito monster. Maybe this is just an expectation of people, but in fact, only the two sides knowing the actual relationship between the giant mosquito monster and the metal monster, and whether there will really be a war. Jia Yan doesn't know what the metal monster thinks, but in his own words, he feels that he must end it with the metal monster at some point. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 330. Otherwise, my family will not be able to live a good life on Earth. And Jia Yan himself also wants to get a more peaceful living environment. Although he has actually made certain arrangements for his next life, at this time, he doesn't want the metal monster to destroy his foothold on the Earth. The sun rises and sets, and a day and night pass. In a dense forest, a huge giant mosquito is crawling in this place. Looking at the distant sun setting in his sight, Jia Yanfu's eyes were filled with thought. I can't go back now. God knows if that red light will target me at any time. It would be bad if the village is invaded by the invaders. Thinking of this, he knelt down again. The exoskeleton on his body seemed to be peeling off. But those peeling parts of the exoskeleton are like a kind of blue debris. If you look closely, you can find that these are not injuries so much as materials that the exoskeleton actively shed due to the attack. If these are not injuries, then the big mosquito just spent too much energy and is now a little tired. Jia Yan was quickly summarizing the battle the day before. Actually, there are some things I haven't done well in dealing with so many metal monsters. If I do better, I can achieve or even exceed the results of that day without having to pay such a high price. Jia Yan was thinking about some of his tactics, but it was obviously unreasonable to think about it now. But the biggest problem is those red rays. If this threat cannot be resolved, we will definitely encounter it again in the next battle. And it is not safe to hide anywhere, and you never know when you will be attacked by the rays. Jia Yan thought about it and felt that the biggest security threat to him was that terrifying red light. If these problems can be solved, then even if he faces tens of thousands of metal monsters again, Jia Yan feels that he can completely solve them as long as he is given time. But the situation is different. If the metal monsters lose their red light help, then they will not make humans so desperate. But how should red light be solved? Think about it. Jia Yan still has no big solution. That's right. If this kind of attack can be cracked so easily, that Daphne will not be forced to leave the Earth easily. Jia Yan shook his head helplessly, perhaps solving the threat of red light. It was much more difficult than he expected. Actually, even if the metal monster problem is solved, there will still be another threat. That's what Daphne said, the detection ships of the three civilizations. Although the detection ship of one of the civilizations probably won't come, the empire where Daphne is located, and the Asta people exploration ships. They are all the next huge threats. Thinking of these things makes Jia Yan even more headache. He had actually thought about the problem of the exploration ship before. It can be said by Defuni that each of them has left the Earth for more than 300 years. 300 years of time. Jia Yan couldn't even imagine how big he would grow. So he had instinctively felt that even if Defuni and others contacted their so-called exploration ship, it will take an unknown amount of time for those exploration ships that are so powerful to return to Earth again. But actually piloting that huge aircraft. After returning to Earth, Jia Yan felt that he had made a mistake. What he was driving was nothing more than an emergency aircraft. But its flying speed is still beyond Jia Yan's imagination. Easily travel over 1,000,000 kilometers in 1 hour. At that speed, 1 hour of flying is enough for Jia Yan to fly at full strength for several days, and that's even when Jia Yan doesn't eat or drink, and his physical fitness reaches its theoretical peak. Even such an aircraft can reach speeds that Jia Yan could not even imagine. So how fast would an alien detection ship that can sail in the interstellar space go? Jia Yan couldn't even imagine this. He couldn't even understand how powerful those civilizations were. Whether it was from Defuni's brief description or the statements in the textbooks, Jia Yan could tell that the so-called empire was an unimaginably powerful interstellar civilization. How powerful was this civilization? Jia Yan really can't understand it now. After all, he is just a creature from a low-level civilization like Earth, and it is normal for him to be unable to understand such a powerful interstellar civilization. He couldn't figure out how powerful a mere exploration ship was. You know, what Jia Yan was working hard to deal with now was just those exploration ships, the backup men who stayed on Earth to mine 300 years ago. So Jia Yan, after thinking about it carefully, felt that maybe it won't be long before the threat of the once distant detection ship will become close at hand. The time for this threat may be 10 years later, maybe 1 year later, God knows. For a moment, chaotic thoughts came over him, and Jia Yan felt as if he was carrying a heavy stone on his back. Ha, what are you thinking about so much? There is a limit to my own strength, no matter how strong it is. At worst, during this period, I will try hard to figure out the function of that aircraft. When the time comes, I will take my family and escape into the universe. There's no way they could chase me all over the solar system just to deal with me, right? Jia Yan thought about it. The current metal monster was not something he could deal with on his own. Time passed so slowly. Perhaps it was because the metal monsters lost traces of him in those buildings, or perhaps they thought there was no need to attack, so Jia Yan was no longer attacked by red light in this forest. His body, which was lying on the ground, gradually recovered from the blue color. On the first day, the deep blue became light blue. The next day, the light blue turned into gray with a slight blue color. On the third day, my body was basically gray, and I could no longer see any blue. On the fourth day, the giant mosquito's body returned to its original dark color. This kind of darkness seems to have become deeper and deeper due to the training of a war, and it has a kind of foundation. It was on this day that the giant mosquito slowly stood up from the ground. The light in his compound eyes never disappeared. Looking at the distant land, there is the place where the small mountain village is. After taking a look, Jia Yan gave up looking over there. He looked at the sky again. The sparkle in his compound eyes became even worse. Then the big mosquito spreads its wings. Bang 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 bang. At this moment, the big mosquito's body completely flew up. Fly towards the sky above your head. This flying speed is too fast. All of a sudden it seemed like it was going to break through the sky. Actually that's right. Jia Yan just wants to break through the sky. Boom boom boom. His figure was extremely fast, but when he flew to the height of a white cloud, a ray of red light seemed to penetrate the void and shoot in his direction. I knew you would come. Jia Yan looked at the light shooting from below, and suddenly used the brainwave power in his head. This was another way he figured out to speed up his reaction after a few days of thinking. In the past, When he reacted very quickly, he only relied on the power of his wings, which was a bit unsmooth after all. So after a few days of repairing and sorting out his thoughts, he finally figured it out. That is, he no longer relies on the muscle power of his wings. Instead, he needs the combination of wing power and brainwave power. It is not easy to survive such a powerful brainwave power. If he does not know how to use it, then what a pity. This is the moment for him to show off his research results. Jia Yan only felt that there seemed to be a strong concussive force being released in his head. After that, his brainwave power directly acted on a certain part of his body. At this time, his wings also cooperated with the power of his brainwaves and flew away in the direction of the vibration. In an instant, Jia Yan actually felt a violent overload of power that he had never experienced before. This kind of overloaded power is extremely terrifying. Big Mosquito's current body has extremely strong defense, but he is still a little dizzy. This shows how fast his body can move in an instant. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 331. At the next moment, Jia Yan felt a red light beside him, grazing his body and shooting towards the vast sky of the universe. Missed. Very good. My idea is not wrong. At the moment of evasion, I use the most powerful brainwave power. Although it is not easy to control, and the brainwave power can only be used for a moment, this power is enough for me to dodge. There's so much danger. Jia Yan seemed to have discovered a new continent, the luster in his compound eyes was shining brightly. Okay. Keep going up. Jia Yan didn't wait any longer, he just vibrated his wings and flew higher into the sky. At the same time, those red rays of light were also fierce, shooting towards the place where he was, shooting with incomparable precision. Jia Yan used his newly developed avoidance method to continuously evade. This is not how Jia Yan can really deal with the red light, because he can only do this kind of thing when he is flying at high altitude and has more space to avoid. Even a few days ago, he was able to do these things. Jia Yan was not training his avoidance, but at this time, while avoiding the red light attack, he kept flying towards higher places. Higher. 10,000 meters. 15,000 meters. 20,000 meters. 25,000 meters. 30,000 meters. Finally, just when the big mosquito reached an absolute altitude of 30,000 meters. Those red rays of light below that are constantly sniping are no longer attacking. Jia Yan's flying figure is no longer simply flying with wings. The air here is already very thin, and his gravity is slowly decreasing. He is just circling the Earth, gently using the dual power of flight and brain waves. Flying slowly and diagonally upward. So high. Without the threat of red light, you can watch the current scenery quietly from the nervous mosquitoes. More than 30,000 meters in the air. This place has become a restricted area of life. The Earth already has a clear circular arc. Countless clouds. Floating underfoot. The houses and trees on the Earth can no longer be distinguished, they are just connected together. The surrounding air is extremely thin. Perhaps humans will suffocate in this place. But for Jia Yan, who can hold his breath and fly in the universe, this place is not his limit at all. It's just that the surrounding temperature is extremely low, probably around 50 or 60 degrees below zero. Jia Yan discovered the gas emitted from his respiratory organs. They all freeze quickly. However, because of the exoskeleton structure that blocks temperature, Jia Yan does not feel too stiff. Flying at such a high altitude, it's really very pleasant. Big mosquitoes don't fly straight upward. Flying in a straight line, I want to break through the Earth's gravity and reach the universe in one breath. There is only the first cosmic speed, which is at least 7.9 kilometers per second. Only then can we break through. Although Jia Yan is in the air and can reach or even exceed that speed in one breath, this does not mean that he is in a semi-vacuum environment without air. It can also reach that speed. So now, he is just using the speed of the previous violent impact, driven by the power of flapping wings and brain waves, to fly around the Earth. This is a steep upward process. He slowly flew up diagonally. In this case, it was not a direct battle with the Earth's gravity, but a slow flight process. In fact, flying to such a high place is not that difficult. Human weather balloons can also reach such a high place, but if they want to continue to rise, it is basically impossible. Because the air is thinner in the sky, the principle of a hot air balloon is to rely on hydrogen, which is lighter than air, to rise. Where there is no air, the hot air balloon cannot go up at all. But Jia Yan is different. After he spent half a day circling the entire Earth, his ascent height has reached 80,000 meters. At this height, it is almost a complete vacuum. The Earth turned into a huge ball, and the blue ocean rendered the entire Earth a blue color. Incomparably beautiful and shocking. Jia Yan looked at the scenery below and couldn't speak to himself for a long time. When he descended from the aircraft, he only took a quick glance and missed such a beautiful scenery because he was in a hurry to get to the ground. Now he uses his greedy eyes to take in all this beautiful scenery. Extremely beautiful. How can we tolerate the destruction of those alien civilizations? Thinking of this, he continued to fly forward. This place is already in the middle layer of the Earth's atmosphere, and the temperature is extremely low, reaching a terrifying -83 degrees. When Jia Yan descended in the past, due to the extremely fast speed, it caused friction with the atmosphere and even caught fire, so now he has no preparation or understanding at all for the temperature here. Cold. Extremely cold. At 83 degrees below zero, even the heat-insulating exoskeleton of Jia Yan's body could not completely defend himself. He felt that his body was about to freeze. Hurry up! During Jia Yan's last mutation process, his internal organs had certain autonomous heating characteristics. But at this time, those organs couldn't bear it anymore, and he started to feel a little stiff. But fortunately, the brainwave power is completely immune to this cold attack. So he can still use his brainwave power to its fullest. What matters now is time. Jia Yan's speed became faster and faster. Although he was still flying around, because the gravity constraint here was getting lower and lower, his flight speed using brainwaves also began to increase. Half an hour later, he finally broke through the middle level. After the freezing cold, what comes oncoming is the extremely high temperature. The layer of atmosphere after the mesosphere is the ionized layer, whose scientific name is the warm layer. As you can tell from the name, this layer of the atmosphere is extremely warm. But for humans, this is more than just warmth. This layer is named after the air that reaches this place is affected by cosmic rays and becomes ionized, emitting huge amounts of heat. It's so hot. No wonder I felt something was wrong when I got out of the aircraft that day. It turns out this layer is so hot. The maximum temperature in the warm layer ranges from more than 400 degrees to 1200 degrees. An ordinary human being would be burned to coke very quickly here. Jia Yan was in agony again. Fortunately, at the beginning of the warm layer, it was not entirely that high. This place was already very far away from the Earth. Jia Yan can move faster. His aircraft stayed only 200 kilometers away from the Earth. Fortunately, there is a remote control. Jia Yan didn't have the confidence to find the aircraft more than 200 kilometers away from the Earth. He just took out the remote control with a unique structure that had been hidden in the wings of his body and pressed a button. After his previous exploration, he knew that this button was the button to call the aircraft. He had not tried the effective range. In short, it was correct that it could be received from extremely long distances. As expected. After waiting for Jia Yan for no more than 10 minutes, he saw a disc-shaped aircraft with a diameter of more than 80 meters slowly approaching him. Actually, I can call the aircraft from a lower place, but there is still the threat of red light there, and this kind of experience of flying to such a high place relying on my own power is also a rare thing. Jia Yan smiled slightly in his heart and he took this arduous flight just to get into the aircraft. When Jia Yan opened the door of the aircraft and entered the aircraft, unknown to him, a flying thing was watching his actions higher up in the sky. This is an artificial satellite flying in space. The flight altitude of the satellite is more than 500 kilometers. It is a reconnaissance satellite. The satellite, which is now fully functional, can be said to have been paying attention to Jia Yan's actions from the moment he took off. Until the UFO aircraft appeared next to Jia Yan, due to the concealment function of the aircraft, it was directly responsible for his actions. This satellite has lost its target. But this is enough. Let me ask you, when those observers watched this big mosquito fly up from the ground, it was directly hit by the red light and flew higher and higher. After that, he even flew to a place more than 200 kilometers above the ground. How could this not surprise or even alarm them?